In a move no one ever expected, King Charles went live and openly slammed Prime Minister Keir Starmer in front of the entire nation. Within minutes, the government collapsed into total chaos. Ministers started resigning, parliament erupted in uproar, and for the first time in 300 years, a reigning monarch openly went to war with a sitting prime minister. This is no longer just a political scandal, it is a full-blown constitutional crisis that could reshape Britain's future forever. If last week felt explosive, what happened tonight took this crisis to an unimaginable level. It all began with an unannounced royal broadcast. At precisely 9:00 p.m., Buckingham Palace cut into all major television and radio networks across the UK. The BBC stopped mid-program. ITV and Sky News were forced to switch feeds. And suddenly millions of viewers were staring at King Charles seated at his desk in Buckingham Palace. His face was stern, his voice calm, but edged with steel. For more than 70 years, no British monarch has ever delivered an unscheduled national address outside of war, disaster, or death. What Charles did tonight didn't just break tradition, it shattered it. The king spoke directly to the people, saying he could no longer remain silent after what he called a direct assault on the crown and the very foundations of Britain's democracy. His words hit like a thunderclap across the nation. For the first time in living memory, a monarch had stepped out of the shadows of constitutional neutrality and entered the battlefield of politics. He said, "The people of this country deserve leadership built on respect, stability, and duty. When that duty is abandoned, when the sacred trust between Parliament and the Crown is broken, it is not only my right but my responsibility to speak. This office I hold is not a costume. It is not a relic. It is the heart of our nation, and I will not stand by while it is mocked and torn apart." Those words changed everything in an instant. Gasps were heard in newsrooms, social media exploded with disbelief, and even seasoned political reporters said they felt chills. Within minutes, hashtags like #King vs PM, #Crown Collapse, and #Starmer Out were trending worldwide. But the most shocking moment came in the king's final words. After a long pause, he looked straight into the camera and declared, "This government no longer commands my confidence. It has lost the trust of the people, and therefore, it has lost the right to govern." Never in modern times had a British monarch spoken such words about a prime minister. The king had not only criticized Starmer, he had effectively pulled the pin on the entire government. The fallout was instant and brutal. Within seconds, Westminster plunged into pandemonium. MPs scrambled to their phones, journalists sprinted through Parliament's corridors, and the Labour government began to implode in real time. The Speaker of the House was forced to suspend Parliament after opposition benches erupted in cheers while Labour MPs sat frozen in shock. Veteran Conservative members were seen clapping, a direct breach of parliamentary protocol, while Reform UK MPs waved copies of the Constitution and shouted, "Resign! Resign!" across the chamber. It was chaos like nothing Britain had seen in modern politics. Inside Downing Street, witnesses described scenes of total breakdown. Senior aides rushed into the Prime Minister's office where Starmer had just watched the royal address live. According to one insider, he was pale, shaking with fury, and muttered under his breath, "He's finished me. The king's finished me." Cabinet members who had already been uneasy about Starmer's leadership wasted no time making their move. Within the first hour of the king's speech, 3 senior ministers, Transport Secretary Louise Hay, Health Secretary Wes Streeting, and Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, announced their resignations. Each released nearly identical statements saying, "The Prime Minister no longer commands the confidence of the country. I cannot in good conscience remain in this government." The phrase "no longer commands the confidence" directly echoed the king's words, making it clear where their loyalty now lay. But it didn't stop there. By midnight, more than a dozen junior ministers had followed suit, effectively hollowing out the government. The Treasury, Home Office, and Education Department were left leaderless as civil servants scrambled to keep basic functions running. Journalists outside Downing Street reported that ministers left in silence, faces grim, refusing to answer shouted questions. It looked less like a functioning government and more like the slow-motion collapse of a regime. On social media, images went viral, car doors slamming shut, resignation letters flashing across news tickers. and a desperate prime minister trapped inside number 10. One political correspondent summed it up perfectly. We are witnessing a live implosion of power. This is history unfolding before our eyes. Meanwhile, the opposition seized the moment. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch addressed cameras just 15 minutes after the royal broadcast. Her words were sharp, calculated, and devastating. The Prime Minister has lost the confidence of the King, the confidence of Parliament, and the confidence of the people. He must do the honourable thing and resign immediately. Nigel Farage was even more ruthless. Surrounded by cheering Reform UK supporters waving Union Jack flags, he declared, "Tonight, the King stood for Britain. Starmer stood against it. The choice is clear: crown and country or chaos and collapse." The message was simple and powerful. Labour had declared war on tradition, and now tradition was striking back. Inside the Labour Party, the knives were out. The WhatsApp group, once called damage control, was now being referred to by MPs as succession planning. Leaked messages showed senior Labour figures openly debating who could replace Starmer before dawn. Angela Rayner's name topped every list, but so did David Lammy, who had been unusually quiet during the crisis. Even Ed Miliband, once dismissed as a relic of Labour's past, was being mentioned as a safe interim choice. Diane Abbott summed up the mood with a blunt message: "It's over. He's finished." The only question now is how quickly we move before the party is dragged down with him. But the most extraordinary development of the night didn't come from Labour or the opposition but from inside the palace. A senior royal aide, speaking anonymously to Sky News, revealed that the King's decision to go live had been kept secret even from senior courtiers until the very last moment. Only his closest advisors and Queen Camilla herself had known of the plan. The King felt he had no choice, the aide explained. He believes his duty to the nation outweighs protocol. He is prepared to take this as far as it needs to go. That statement sent shockwaves through the establishment. Was the King preparing to actively intervene in the running of government? Was this a return to the days when monarchs wielded real power? For centuries, Britain's constitutional monarchy had balanced carefully on the principle of neutrality. Tonight, that balance was shattered. By the early hours of the morning, Downing Street was surrounded not by protesters, but by reporters, cameras, and opposition MPs demanding Starmer's resignation. As the sun rose over London, the scene outside number 10 looked less like the seat of a functioning government and more like the headquarters of a collapsing regime. Reporters described a constant stream of aides entering and leaving with boxes of documents, laptops, and hastily packed belongings. Security officers appeared tense, as if they too sensed that power inside was slipping away by the minute. Inside the cabinet room, Keir Starmer was reportedly holding what staffers described as a war council. According to leaks from Downing Street insiders, the Prime Minister had barricaded himself with his shrinking circle of loyalists, insisting he would not be forced out by what he called a monarch's coup. Witnesses said he pounded the table, repeating over and over, "No king removes a Prime Minister. Not now, not ever." His voice was hoarse, his temper frayed, but his determination unmistakable. He believed that if he could just ride out the immediate storm, Labour MPs would rally behind him against what he called royal interference. But the problem was clear: those MPs were no longer on his side. By mid-morning, Labour's parliamentary party had begun openly breaking ranks. More than 60 MPs had signed a motion demanding Starmer step aside, calling his leadership untenable. What made this different from any ordinary rebellion was the speed. Normally, party revolts take days, sometimes weeks, to gain momentum. This one moved like wildfire. Every hour brought new defections, fresh resignation letters, and statements from MPs who just days earlier had stood shoulder to shoulder with him. Even some of his closest allies were now publicly silent, and that silence spoke volumes. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor and once considered Starmer's most loyal supporter, was nowhere to be seen. When reporters tracked her down at her constituency office, her only comment was, "I'm reflecting on the events of last night." That single line sent shockwaves through the financial markets, which were already in freefall. The pound dropped 3% overnight, and the FTSE 100 plunged at the opening bell as investors panicked over a leadership vacuum in Britain. The opposition, sensing blood, pressed harder. Kemi Badenoch announced that the Conservatives would table an immediate vote of no confidence in the government. Nigel Farage, never one to miss the spotlight, declared that Reform UK would back the motion, calling it the final nail in Starmer's coffin. Suddenly, the numbers in Parliament no longer added up. Without the loyalty of his own MPs, Starmer could not survive such a vote. The arithmetic was brutal, and everyone in Westminster knew it. The Prime Minister's authority had not just been weakened, it had been annihilated. But instead of preparing to step down, insiders say Starmer doubled down. He ordered his remaining aides to draft a speech to the nation, one that would present him as the defender of parliamentary democracy against what he claimed was an unelected monarch meddling in politics. He wanted to frame the king's intervention as dangerous, undemocratic, and even unconstitutional. According to one aide, Starmer was heard saying, "If I go down, I'm taking him with me." But that speech never reached the cameras. Just minutes before Starmer was scheduled to address the nation, chaos erupted inside Number 10. Senior Labour figures, including Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner and Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, stormed into the cabinet room to confront him directly. What happened next has already entered political legend. According to multiple sources, Rayner looked him